This conference will now be recorded.
But understand.
Good. We'll start the special call meeting August 6, 2021 at 12:06 p.m. Call to order. Ivan Sandoval. Present. Maribel Diaz.
Present.
Esmeralda Solis.
Present.
Lloyd Loya.
Present.
Cesar Rodriguez. Absent. Adolfo Arriaga. Absent. We do have a quorum. Item 1B, public comments. Mr. Science.
There was nobody that submitted for the public.
Okay. Item 2, minutes. Item A, approval of minutes for the May 6, 2021 AGUA board meeting.
So moved.
Motion by Sandoval. Need a second?
Second.
Second by Solis. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 3, presentation by IM Insurance Agency on the Texas Mutual Dividend Check.
Then, Mr. President, members of the board, we had a presentation by IM Insurance Agency on a dividend check that we received from Texas Mutual. I'll go ahead and let Mr. Martinez make the presentation.
Good afternoon, and for the record, my name is Ismael Martinez. I am the agent of record for AGUA Special Utility District for several different policies. This one in particular, this one is with Texas Mutual. They are our workers' comp carrier. They've been with us quite a while now since I became the agent, and we've been very fortunate over the past several years that we've been getting dividends. And a dividend check is like a refund. We are members of their policyholder family group, and it's based on, of course, claims experience. You know, how many losses they've had to pay out against our premiums. And it also, we're entitled to the dividend because of the profitability of Texas Mutual nationwide state. So we're in that pool. So we've had good performances. So this year, the dividend that we're receiving from them is in the amount of $13,414.55, which our premium for the year was $57,396. So that dividend, that brings us down to approximately $43,981.45, what we will pay in our premiums for our insurance program. Then you'll find a packet that's there. There is a letter from Texas Mutual just congratulating us and saying thank you for allowing us to be your carriers. They are giving away $3.4 billion back to the Texas businesses like us in the public entity sector. So they are a very quality company. They take care of our employees. And again, we've been very fortunate over the last 2 or 3 years to get a dividend check back. We will be having some information that we're going to disseminate back to the benefit committee and board members here in the near future, because we are coming up for renewal. And we'll bring you up to date on the situation and the status that we have pending. However, this is a good news that we're getting $13,414 back into the general fund. And we thank you on my agency's behalf and our MCA and Texas Mutual for the opportunity to serve you and all the employees of AGUA Special Utility District. Any questions?
Mr. Martinez, can you explain to the board why there's a different address on the check?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We have on the check, you'll see that it says paid to the order of AGUA SUD, 6320 Southwest Boulevard, Suite 116 in Bentonville, Texas. That is the address to our managing general agency. We had a situation a little over a year ago where they mailed the dividend check to AGUA SUD. We never got it. It wasn't in the PO box, and it wasn't in our physical address. So they stopped the payment on the check, reissued the check, and what we requested was to send it to our managing general agency in Fort Worth. They physically get it, and then they mail it to me directly so that I know that we got it, and I hand deliver it to AGUA SUD, to Mr. Science or Pam or Cindy, whomever is deemed necessary to deal with the check. So I just don't want to have that happen again, because this is late. And this way we guarantee that the check's going to get here unless something happens to me. That's purpose behind it. We just check and balance, we wanna make sure that we get what is ours from the company. So that's the explanation for the app.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Sounds good.
Okay, if, nothing else, may I do?
Yes,
Sir, thank you.
Appreciate your time.
thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Item number 4, discussion of possible action or approval of resolutions to remove and add new authorized signers to all AGUA escrow and investment accounts.
Mr. President, obviously, we have so many accounts. Some of them are regular accounts that we sign off on a regular basis. Others are just escrow companies, we didn't test their one has come in and said, we need to close up and clean up the rest of them that we need to do so. And we usually have, our officers take care of them, signing the check. So what we're doing is cleaning it out from the past, boards that we've had and cleaning them all up to where the 4, officers are done, and we just need to approve a resolution at your direction to go ahead and go there. So that we can get it done at the back.
Need a motion for item number 4?
I make a motion to authorize the executive officers, to sign on all the new investment.
Okay. Motion was made by Solis,
I second the motion.
second by Diaz. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 5, discussion possible action on approval of resolution amending the AGUA employee policy handbook.
Mr. President, at the direction of the board and the committee appointed by the president, the district, including legal, has been in the process of reviewing and updating the employee manual related to a variety of different items and policies. That book has been 70 pages. It has been redlined and revised, and Jaron Hudgens, who has spearheaded that effort, is on the phone and is prepared to discuss those changes with the board today. What I had hoped would happen, but I warned people last week when we had these meetings for this agenda that it may not be ready. What I'd hoped is that we could circulate a red line to everybody by email like we did with the district policy, so you could have reviewed the 70 pages in advance of today's meeting with the red line. If you had any questions or comments or suggestions, what we could do. Obviously, that didn't get done in time to circulate to you all, or if I had circulated last night, I'd have to by now anyway. So that's where we are on that project. It's also possible that we could have Cindy print out 7 copies of the 70 pages each, and y'all could look it over this afternoon. Another option would be for y'all to table the item, and I will circulate that draft by email to everybody this afternoon, and then you can take it up at the next meeting at the discretion.
Whatever y'all want to do. You want Jaron to do an update? Or, sorry.
I know you have appointed a committee.
Yes, sir.
And I know that there's also a staff committee that we've had. The last time we met, it took several hours. I'd like to give the employee committee an opportunity to review that.
Okay, yes.
And that'd be a good idea. What I can do is send it to Mr. Sines and then have his committee staff look at it before we circulate it to the board.
Motion to table item 5.
Motion by Loya. Second by Sandoval. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 6, discussion possible action on approval of resolution amending AGUA bylaws.
President, following, I guess early this last spring, you had asked legal to begin reviewing the bylaws and our policies and procedures for procurement due to the fact that there have been a number of legislative changes that have occurred since the last time the bylaws were amended, which I think was in 2014, before everybody was involved with AGUA as far as I understand. We have done that, and we have taken some recommendations from the CEO and incorporated them into the bylaws. Really, just brought them completely up to date. There's number of sections of the bylaws that were just out of date based on statutory changes over the years and things of that nature. Several of the changes involve direction regarding the authority that the general manager has to execute contracts. There have been at least 2 amendments to the district's enabling legislation that talk about different authority that the general manager has and whatnot. So what we've done is gone through and updated these bylaws. Now, I was able to circulate to everybody's email address earlier this week a copy of those in hopes that you'd have a chance to take a look at them in advance. But what I am prepared to do right now is to go through those bylaws, not, with a 2-hour-long presentation, but to just basically go through and, give everyone kind of an update about, what the basic changes were. And that way, if there are any questions that you have of me, I'm glad to answer them. If there's, obviously the board can discuss and deliberate, any other changes they want, but I'm prepared to do that right now. Just that, okay.
Yeah, board, you all good?
Could we have like a work session on this? I mean, it's kind of important, and do that.
I mean, certainly the board can, handle it however they want. That's up to the board right there. Fine.
Because I know we also have, on the next item, is, AGUA procurement policy.
Yes.
You're gonna go into that for a while as well, right?
Well, so hopefully it's not going to take too long. Most of those changes between the two match each other. So for instance, the procurement policy discussed, what authority, what we're supposed to do if we're going to buy something that's, less than $1,000, more than 1,000 but less than 25, and so forth. Those changes really match up. Plus with the statutory changes. So I think what will happen is we can spend a little bit of time on the bylaws and get through the high points, and then the procurement policy will be, that's, the same thing.
Yeah, and that was updated by Mr. Juan, Finance Director.
So let me. Okay, so if everybody has a copy of what I've circulated, the amended bylaws, let me just go through here and really highlight for you what the main changes were. And when I say main changes, the substantive changes, there were a lot of grammatical corrections and definitions and things like that. But let's just go through here, start with, and really what we want to talk about is to start with Article 2 of the board. Here's a good example of some of the changes we made. When these bylaws were originally drafted, the most recent version were drafted, the district had 7 members, but there were 2 at large, and then, and then 5 from individual cities. That's changed. So you can see we've updated section 2.01, say the board is composed of 7 directors, each of whom represents a unique sub-district, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's directly out of the amendments to the neighborhood statute. So there's that. Education and training, this is something that we wanted to work on. The statute as originally written, the AGUA enabling statute, and then the bylaws that were in effect at the time dealt with training that related a lot to what had happened when La Jolla was dissolved, La Jolla Water Supply Corporation was dissolved, and the AGUA was created. There were a lot of provisions in the training that said, you had to watch a video that's, 10, 15, 20 years old. It seemed like, that nobody can really see or understand. But the statute says that the board has the authority to amend the training regimen to, better match, the times and whatnot. And so this training section that we revised here got rid of things that were really, in our view, no longer important, no longer applicable, things of that nature. So the education and training section has been updated. I think that'll help streamline and clarify any questions on whether we really need to watch that video. So that was another highlight area.
So on section 2.03, oath and bond, I know we had discussed that one also.
Yep. Okay, so the way this is worded, I can understand it may create a little bit of confusion, but just to clarify. So, everybody here has posted a $10,000 bond that's required by statute. The way this is worded, it says that each director shall post a good sufficient bond for the Secretary of State in the amount of $10,000 payable to AGUA SUD. Okay. What that means is that the board members are not paying anything to AGUA SUD. In fact, AGUA SUD pays for the bond that is written for each director. The reason why it says payable to the AGUA SUD is because what a bond is supposed to do is to protect AGUA SUD in case, some event that causes harm. Much like a construction contract, right? You got a construction contract with the general contractor, and there's a bond requirement. That bond is payable to AGUA SUD, because if it ever comes into play, well, then the bonding, the surety owes the district the money. So, Mr. Tiarina, board president, asked, if that was a typographical error or something like that, and I totally understand why it would seem wrong, but that's the way it's supposed to be. So, board members do not pay $10,000, nor do they pay for the bond, but the district procures a bond for the board members payable to the district. Does that answer your question, Mr. President?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, let's look at Article 3, which is 3.01, General Manager. This is one of the areas that has quite a So section 3.01 of the general manager, there's been a number of changes to the statute relating to the general manager. And really what we've done here are parrot the language from the statute regarding what the general manager does, what his or her authority is, obligations he or she has, all right? So just reading through real quick, the board shall employ a person with prior experience in training. As we know, and as we'll see on an agenda item later, one of the revisions to the enabling law is that the general manager of the district has to be an employee, can no longer be a contracted person or a contracted company. It has to be an individual employee, all right? And so that's language that we added here to make that clear. Again, the bylaws are intended to be not only guidelines for the district to operate, but what I've tried to do with these revisions is also make it kind of like a go-to cheat sheet, to some extent, so you don't have to remember from when you got training that it was section 72.01071 of the Texas Local Government Special Laws Code that says the general manager can't, enter into a contract with a related party or something like that. Okay, so what I've done here with these bylaws is incorporate the key language from the statutes in there, and to the extent that there's like some statutes that have way too much language to fit in here without adding 5 pages, is we just make reference to it. For instance, the very last sentence of section 3.01 says the general manager must comply at all times with section 72.01071 and 072. Those are relating to the qualifications that the director has to have, that general manager, I should say, that he or she can't enter into, contracts with family members and things of that nature. So that way, if somebody wanted to look here and get an idea about where they might go, to see what the details are that this section will address. I don't know, Eddie, if you've got any suggestions or questions or thoughts on any of those changes, but those are just. There's also other issues, like that. The statute says that you can't enter into a contract of more than 2 years. We incorporated that in there. But there are not any policy changes to this section that aren't already set forth in the statute. So if anybody's got any questions about any of the particular language in there, I'm fire away. Glad to discuss in more detail.
Who is the administrative committee?
Executive committee. That's also by bylaw. It says executive.
one of the very first ones is board administration. I saw one there where it says executive.
Yeah, that is, interestingly, that is not language we changed, and we would make any changes to
And then there's the executive committee of the board.
Well, apparently at one point there was an administrative committee appointed by the president, because of course the president does have the authority to appoint committees. And it says the financial report approved by the board's administrative committee or other committee as may be established for the board. I don't know what the administrative committee is. We didn't look at that session, but I think I'll have to change it.
So it would probably be
Any committee
headed by
established.
the treasurer. I don't know, if you want to establish an administrative committee or.
No, because it's an annual report.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So if there needs to be one established, is the financial report approved by the board's administrative committee or system committee? So we usually submit everything directly to the board.
sure.
Unless we establish it.
Well, it does say, or such other committees may be established.
Correct.
So I think what we just do there is if the board wanted to establish a committee, when we're dealing with the annual report, that'd be something we can do as part of the year.
And on the executive, it would be an appointed one?
The executive committee, the executive committee is set forth in the bylaws as the office.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, for instance, okay. Okay, so if you look at section 2.05 on page 4, oh no, 2.08 committee says, president may establish and designate board members for advisory committees and appoint their chairpersons for formulation of policy recommendations to the board, such other purposes. An executive committee comprised of the president, vice president, secretary is hereby established, and the board shall establish the scope and function of that committee by resolution. That's been in bylaws since we did not make that change. And so, for instance, that concept of having an executive committee is something that you'll see when we discuss some of the changes to procurement policy, which, one of the things that we have to be able to do as a district is to be nimble in the face of emergency procurement issues. If on Tuesday night, water line explodes, we don't have time for a meeting, the general manager needs to be able to hire somebody to go take care of it, even if it costs more than $75,000 or whatnot. Okay? But the way we've set up the policies is that the general manager would consult with or advise the executive committee before that happens. Okay, so if Mr. Sines has got to run out and get some people on site immediately that night because there's a public health and safety issue, there's no time for a call meeting. Instead of just running out and hiring, he needs to call the members of the executive committee and say, here is what's fixing to happen, so that there's at least not a surprise, going forward. That's then got to come back to the board later, but it's an idea of transparency and communications in the event an emergency comes up. Okay, so the most significant changes relate to the financial section 5. It starts on page 7. And I do want to explain this because the language as written before seemed to contradict itself. It talked about certain rules applying to purchases under at the time $50,000 and whatnot. But what I realized later is that there was a section that talked about contracts for purchases of a certain amount versus expenditures of a certain amount. So in other words, it would be different if we're entering into a contract to hire lobbyists for $5,000 a month for 2 years. That's a contract, as opposed to, hey, we need to buy a brand new van or a pickup truck, that's equipped with whatever that costs $55,000. So an expenditure, the way these are set up, is is, you're writing a check to purchase some equipment or something really on a one-time event as opposed to a contract that
Spot
is,
purchase.
what's that?
Spot purchase.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so, under 5.01 deals with contracts. It says general manager is authorized to enter into any contract or execute, deliver on any instrument named in the SUD, and the total value not to exceed $25,000. That is currently $50,000 in the bylaws, all right? It was recommended to me, to include $25,000 by the board president in this case for the board's consideration. So that's obviously something that could be changed depending on the deliberation and discussion, that happens today. But we put a number, in the blank for purposes of today's, meeting and discussion. So, it has been $50,000 before, it's been proposed to go to $25,000 this year.
Okay, so let's say we need to buy some equipment for $26,000. We need to wait for the board meeting to get that approved?
Under this, yes, sir.
And what do you recommend? Or general manager, I mean, that's,
No, look, I
I
mean,
think the operations would be impacted, no?
well, it certainly could be, and there is a balance, a balancing, that needs to go on between what's an appropriate amount that allows the general manager to handle the day-to-day operations without, having, so much authority dollar-wise that the board is, just unaware of a lot of material purchases. And the answer is, I don't have a recommendation, and that's because it's, number one, from a legal standpoint, you guys get to decide policy. You guys get to do policy. But I mean, it's a fair point, it's a good point, and it's one that needs to be discussed. Is $25,000 too little? Was $50,000 too much? Is a 40, if you think about it, if we were a $10 billion business, all right, clearly the CEO or the general manager needs more than, $25,000 authority, because most of the transactions that go out are for that. You bog down the business and having to wait to buy, the $26,000, pipe that we need, that we buy every 6 months. Now, I will say this, you gotta remember, this is, to be contemplated in line with the annual budget that is approved by the board at the start of each year. So, one thing that is a check and balance on the system as well. All right. So if you have a pre-approved line item budget for $285,000 for pipe, whatever the item is, well then the board has already approved the expenditure of that, and so maybe maybe there should be some more latitude in that. But those are really policy decisions that this board needs to contemplate and decide. Hey, look, do we want to have a special meeting every time we need something at $26,000, or is $50,000 more appropriate, or that's fine.
Well, a majority of them are probably under the 25, but there have been occasions, especially at lift stations, we got within when the whole pipe bust or a motor goes out. There was, one time it was probably about a $35,000, $40,000 expenditure, but obviously we need to address it. Now, if there's a way where anything maybe between the 25 and 50, you just make at least 3 phone calls to the executive committee, let them know this is happening. Because we got to address it, or this station we're going to back up. Because, we run a $10 million operation. The time those costs are going to be up.
In other words, I don't want to wait 72 hours to have a meeting to approve something for $26,000.
If there's just a call of 3 people and say, hey, I got to do this. And sometimes when something backs up, and I guess I always pick on the sewer plant with Jaime because he's always needing electrical work, and sometimes you call the electrician to go out there, and then when he finds out the problem, and it's a $27,000 problem, we've got to address it, or else the lift station ain't working, or the plant ain't working. So,
let me point to some language here, because this is a good discussion. All right, so remember, we're talking about the contract section here, so this section 5.01 is talking about, we're going to pay this person $5,000 a month, okay? In in the spot purchase section, like, Mr. Loya mentioned, starts at the bottom of page 8. So let me show you some language that may, make folks more comfortable with. So this is talking about, purchases. So expenditures less than $25,000 may be made by the general manager without prior board approval, provided that the board, approved budget items, okay? And the expenditure will not cause the board approved item to exceed its annual limit. That would be an example of, hey, look, the board has budgeted $200,000 for pipe, and now he needs 24 more thousand. What happened there? That would go to the board. Okay? But let's say expenditures to acquire goods and services amount that exceed 25,000 require approval by the board in advance in the event of an emergency or urgency. Okay, those are two different words. And the urgency language was in the bylaws before. And at first I thought it was duplicative, but then I thought about that. No, that's right. Because there's a difference between an emergency, which is more limited. What's going to be an emergency is different than something that's urgent. All right. And so I think that, by using those two words, both emergency and urgency, I think it would give the general manager more latitude to go ahead and, make some, urgent purchase. Maybe it's not an emergency that we need to have the pipe, purchased by today on Friday afternoon, but it may be urgent because the price of pipe on Monday is going to go up by 15%. And so now it is urgent that he or she takes action now. Hey, I'm going to call, you folks, people on the executive committee and let you know that this is what I plan on doing. But I think that provides some latitude and may address, Director Loya, some of the concerns that you've got. Again, I'm not advocating one way or the other.
No. But it's good that you're explaining everything, so the board knows.
So, yeah, if that's in there, then.
Yeah, and then the general manager may make or approve expenditures exceeding 25,000 hours consultation with the executive committee of the board to extend flexible. So that means that's where you're explaining it, is that you can make the call.
Right.
And the board
There are
can.
times when that'll happen.
Yeah, that way we don't have to be waiting, like Mr. Loya
You don't
says.
even know what the costs are gonna be until it gives us an estimate.
Yeah, sure. So that's the balancing act.
I mean, 25,000 doesn't really, but whatever. I think we can proceed.
Okay, all right. So kind of combing through the audit, all that sort of thing, budget, we didn't make really any changes to that, I don't believe. Okay, so purchasing, 5.07, this goes through, the items that we discussed on the spot type purchase. We've already discussed the 25,000 emergency or urgency language. Item B is an item that I just kind of want to point out to the board. This language is largely in there. I cleaned it up a little bit, but the board approves a budget, with a certain amount of money. Now, it is common in businesses, including governmental entities, that the general manager will have the authority to move budgeted items from one place to the other. Okay, let's say that you budgeted, I'll just use my silly hypothetical, that pipe on one, and let's say sodas on the other. So the board has approved $100,000 for snacks for the office and $200,000 for pipe, and we're at the budget because we need $25,000 more on pipe. But man, we've only bought $50,000 worth of Coke this year, so it makes sense that they can, transfer those budgets. Now, there's some sensitivity to that because that leaves some room for, some funny business. But that's an authority that really the general manager needs to be able to have, because if the overall budget of the district is met, in other words, you're not spending more than the budget, it makes sense to have some latitude to be able to move and change, okay, we over budgeted this, but under budgeted on that. We don't need a board meeting to discuss moving that over. But there's, some consultation with the executive committee again, that's incorporated in that section. So that's something I wanted y'all to be aware of.
What are reserve funds? It says there budget categories or that reserve funds or very last compliant.
I'm going to guess that Juan could probably speak to that, a little bit. That's an accounting, I didn't make that change. My, lawyer understanding is that, it's not uncommon that there will be reserve funds for emergencies or contingencies or something like that. What is your?
What the reserve?
Yeah.
Can you repeat that again?
I think it's asking for definition of what is reserve fund.
Okay. Well, there's two different kinds of reserves, right? There's one for operations, and there's others that we have for debt service reserve. So one of our debts requires certain amount of reserves that we should have, right? And there are other reserves for operations, right? So there are some regulations regarding our debt that we need to keep those reserves. It's not optional. We need to have, and those ones we have in our debt.
And I guess I'm asking on reserve fund, that also might go under the category of impact fees or whatever.
No, that's all. No. The impact fee and the water rights are different funds that are restricted funds. Only like impact fee is for projects that, for growth, water rights, for the purchase of water rights. But these reserves is probably, and that one is more either for our debt, because sometimes when we issue a bond, they require us to have an amount, like a specific amount, right? Or we can also have another reserve, but for operations, which usually is a 3 month recommend. So that.
Okay, so we have a reserve, an operations reserve account that's on our chart account. Okay. Separate from the restricted reserves that we have to maintain to meet bond payments and things like that. Okay. So on the budget then, on the overall budget, there's gonna be an operations reserve. So it's like a savings account or something like that that's specified. Instead of saying, hey, this is for pipe and this is for sodas, it just says, hey, these are reserves for operations. So that's what it is. Okay. Didn't change anything with disposal of property, assets. Those are the key points that we've highlighted there. And like I said, I know that y'all had an opportunity to look at it before, but if there are any other particular questions, that's what we've done. The board is free to discuss, reject, table, whatever they want to do on any particular paragraph, provision of these. But it's a project that I wanted to undertake in years past, just because of statutory changes. There's been more changes, so it really brings the district up to what we believe to be, a more updated, accurate, concise set of bylaws.
So we still have to amend or revise section 3.03. That's the one that was they were talking about the board's administrative committee.
Oh, no, I don't think that needs to be amended. I mean, it could, we could change that. We could just say,
Or just
scratch that section that says the board administrative committee. I mean, we could do that right now if y'all wanted to line that out. I guess my thinking on that, looking at it, for the first time under the camera here, it does say, or other such committee as may be established before for this purpose. I don't remember, as an annual report been being done, I don't even know if, I know we do the annual audit. That's a different deal from an annual report. I don't know what's been done on that.
Not that I recall.
But so I would just say, that's not a change. That's something that's been in there. It clearly contemplates the board's got the authority to make a change, which let's not forget, the board has got the authority to make changes to the bylaws at any time anyway. It's just nice to have a set of documents that everyone can rely on without, 10 different places that you've got to go.
Gotcha. Any other questions, comments, recommendations?
I mean, really, to me, the big question, at least based on the feedback we're getting here, would be the dollar amount of the authority for the general manager on this purchasing. And, look, that can be changed too. I mean, that's something that y'all can change. September, meeting can be in September. But that's something that can be changed too. One of the, let's not forget that one of the items on the agenda is to solicit an RFQ or, seek applications for the general manager position, since we have to make the change due to the contract employee, issue. So that's something that, the board's gonna be looking at when reviewing candidates.
Go forward. Go forward. Okay.
You wanna go for it? You all look good with the 25?
Yeah.
Anything after that, the executive committee can approve it.
I said also stipulate on that one on the emergency, so it doesn't happen often, but in the event that it does happen, I think.
Yeah, I'll make, whoever you make that call, say, hey, it's gonna cost $35,000.
Well, yeah, now if we see that it's something
Yeah.
that or true,
Yeah, but that's what, Mr. Science is saying, that we're like, the
Yeah, that's-
GM will make the call to executive committee
Yeah.
and they'd approve. And that way they,
Not approved, it's consultation. Okay, remember, the executive committee's not gonna make a decision on something requiring board action. But what the intent is that, there needs to be communication. It has to be, less than 3, that's why the executive committee is less
Okay,
than 4.
where there's not a quorum.
Less than 4, right?
Okay.
Okay. But the idea is, look, if the district has hired a general manager that, is experienced and can handle situations, and that there is a trust factor there, so if, he or she calls and says, hey, look, I've got a $30,000 issue that I need to get resolved right now, hey, look, that he knows about it, it's gonna come up to the next board instead of showing up and finding out, wait, it's a $30,000 check.
yeah.
And, look, obviously, if the general manager makes a phone call to the executive committee, and the executive, 2 or 3 of the members says, I don't agree with that, well, then the general manager's gonna have to make a decision on, whether or not that's.
I'm off the hook.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
No, but obviously, it's an emergency, you're gonna be notified, and
Yes.
you feel you need more information, we'll get it, But, yeah, at the same time, Ian's gotta make that decision, whether, can he wait 2 or 3 days, or does the decision need to be made that day?
Yeah.
So, that's when the phone call comes.
And they always come at, 9:30 on Friday night. Like, sometimes, I receive calls at midnight. So there's a inverse relationship. The higher the dollar amount, the fewer the phone calls. Exactly.
But it's, many occasions.
It's once in a while. So it's up to the board, I mean.
No, you wanna agree? Like,
What are we talking about, 25,000 Gloria?
Yeah.
No, about.
No, but it's been a motion, so
A couple
we're
of
still.
phone calls and we approve it, and so like what you had said, that.
I think we leave it at 50, and it makes no sense to bring it, if it was like $200,000, bring it down, okay, but for 25,000, I think too much of I think we give our GM the opportunity to just carry on with the operation without having to make that phone call, and we all work, we all got things to do, but, I mean, the majority wants to do 25,000, we'll do 25,000, maybe what it is. Someone make a motion.
Bueno, a ver. But the
I'm just
board
saying,
decides,
if
I'm good.
it had been at 50,000, like a school board is 50,000, city is 50,000, that city manager has that authority. But it is what it is. Up to the board. And it was up to me, I say with 50, that way we just carry on with the way we're operating right now, but that's the way I'm thinking. You get what I'm saying, it's only 25,000, it's not like we're talking about 200,000 or $500,000. He has $50,000 to work with, and I think that's a fair amount, and I think that's a reasonable, price or threshold for the general manager.
So what's on the table for the item that we're on would be to discuss and approve an amendment to the bylaws. Okay, so the board could say, hey, look, or some somebody could make a motion to approve the bylaws as written in the draft provided. It could be a motion to, approve the bylaws with change 1, change 2, and change 3. Okay, or it could be, hey, approve the shredders bylaws.
Everything else makes sense. I like everything else. That's the only one we don't have. So in terms of the board,
I mean, well, the only thing that I'm saying is that the general manager is saying that it doesn't happen very often, so I don't think that it would be a problem, even if we move it to the 25,000. And like Mr. Page just said, if we're noticing that it is something that, it is becoming a problem, we are facing issues over the 25,000, then by all means, we'll just come in and change it back to the 50.
You can always
Let's
amend it.
see how it goes. Maybe this will work out better than the way it goes. So,
is that your motion?
that's my motion.
Okay, motion made by.
Well, let's, I mean, this is a pretty big deal. Let's make a more clear motion.
Okay.
It would be, a motion to approve the, amended and restated bylaws as presented, in the form presented today.
That's me, so these have to,
So I make a motion, to amend the revised and amended, bylaw as presented today.
I have a motion by Solis, second by Loya. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 7, discussion possible action, approval of resolution amending the AGUA SUD procurement policy.
Okay, so this will be a lot shorter document, too, it's a lot more repetitive. So the policy is a document that the staff, the general manager can rely upon, to look at just procurement instead of having to go through, the 10, 12 pages of bylaw.
On this one, Matt, I just want to add so the board knows that there was a committee. It was revised by our financial director, Juan. Esmer and myself were there. It was the general manager, and we had the staff there.
Yeah.
So they'll know
what
how.
went into it before it came to legal was, as I understand it, the committee took a look at it that had been previously appointed. I know that we had changes that came to us by the chief accountant's office. We then incorporated those changes into the prior policy, all right? We, like we did with bylaws, went and looked and updated statutes and whatnot. For instance, the prior policy PIS was in, purchasing cooperative before, and so we added this and that. I know we used, the PIS 5 board, things of that nature. There was some, like for instance, there was a section that was $1,000 purchases to $5,000 purchases, and then $5,000 to $25,000, but they were really the same thing. So we just combined those into the same. There were no differences in the policy requirements.
There's a typo on item B. Purchase from 1,000 to 224,999.
Where?
It should be only 24,000.
Right, on
Item B.
page 2, 1,000 to 224,000.
Yeah, it should only be up to $24,999. There's an extra 2 in there.
It's on the.
It's on the other one.
Okay.
Okay. You're looking at a different document.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll fix that one then. Okay. The one that I'm talking about right now, the policy, you're looking at the procedure. Okay.
Yeah.
So the policy.
Oh, so you were looking at the table item.
Am I off?
It's the other sheet.
No, there's 2 procurement.
No, there's 2.
Procurement.
Yeah, that's where,
And.
Juan, did you have a chance to revise this documentation?
The procurement, right?
Yeah, the procurement, the way,
Based on the changes that we discussed in the meeting.
yes, okay. Just to make sure that,
Yeah.
you went over, because this is your department.
Okay, so there's 2 documents. One are the procurement policies, and then the other is the procedures. The policies are just policies that the board directed, all right, if it's between this amount, here's what we're gonna do. And then the procedures are really drafted by the accounting staff, say, all right, now, when we buy it, you take step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so what's on the agenda for this item are the procedures, and that really just outlines what we're doing with regards to certain dollar amounts, okay? So for instance, if it's less than $500, the purchase of goods or service under this scenario is made at the discretion and best judgment of the general manager or the chief accountant, all right? This makes sense. I mean, if you're talking about, the general manager doesn't need to approve purchasing $275 worth of pencils, for the office staff. That's something that the chief accountant can handle. Similar up to $1,000, just a little bit more.
That's a lot of pencils.
Sorry.
What are you gonna do with all those pencils, what?
The list is really long. I'm sorry. And so we've got categories of under 500, 500 to 999, 1,000 to 24,999. And as you can see, that the idea here is that, the more money you're spending, the more due diligence that we're going to go through. We're not going to send out pencils for bid, right? We're not going to send out, $800 worth of equipment for a bid. But when you get to $1,000 and up to $24,999, what we're going to do here is we don't have to have advertised competitive bidding, but we're going to go get 3 quotes. And that might be, hey, look, I called 3 different places. We need, $8,000 worth of pipe. I'm going to call, pipe company A, B, and C and do it that way. So we're not, freezing up the operations of the business to, submit competitive bids for something of that nature. But, hey, look, at the same time, we're going to make sure we at least got that split. Okay? $25,000 is when you start getting some other procurement rules. For one, we have that category there because that, would exceed, the proposed, what's been approved, I guess, is the new general manager's limit. So in that situation, you are going to go get 3 bids, okay? Then, you can always use a buy board like tips if that's available. So that's a resource to get things done quickly. Anything $50,000 or more gets us into water code rules regarding certain projects. There are, like for instance, what's quote a construction project has got to be, go through this process of bidding. Other rules, and we've cited those rules in each section here because, like, you might have to have a bond if a construction project is up to $50,000, things of that nature. And then anything over $50,000 is going to have to go out to bid. All right. We did add in, after quite a bit of discussion since I've been on board this time around, a section regarding contracts. All right. We've had these discussions about termination of contracts, termination provisions, entering into contracts for a long period of time and then not being able to get out of them. And so we added into this policy, and this is language I drafted, says it's the policy of the district to procure contracts for goods and services on the most advantageous and fiscally prudent terms possible. So that's pretty obvious. With respect to contracts for consultation, services, and recurring obligations, it's a policy of the district to avoid contracts with automatic renewal provisions. Okay? And it's not uncommon for an automatic renewal provision to be included in the contract. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you're dealing with a public entity or board like this, who the 7 board members have other jobs and other things, knowing that a contract is going to renew automatically 90 days before it's done or something like that, it gets a little difficult. Now, sometimes there may be a situation where we have to have this particular vendor, or what they're the only vendor around, and they won't do it unless they have that. Well, okay, this doesn't say we can't do it, but it's a policy that I drafted up at the recommendation of not only the president, but based upon discussions that have been had in this room in public meetings over other contracts we've been dealing with. Okay, and so whether or not the board likes that language and wants to make that district policy, that's part of the discussion and deliberation. Going along with that, it says, shall further be the policy of the district enter into contracts with the option to terminate on reasonable notice. Right now, it is obviously typical that it would be more advantageous to the purchaser to be able to terminate, on 30 days notice. But again, you can't really, I don't think it would be prudent from the board standpoint to enact a policy that said, hey, you know, everything is gonna, you know, has to be a 30-day termination clause, because there's lots of contracts that, you know, whoever you're entering a contract with just won't do that. You know, it's a deal that takes 6 months, you know, before it's completed, you know, something of that nature. And so, like we talked about before, it's kind of a balancing issue. And so I think that having a stated policy that it's our objective to enter into contracts that allow us to terminate it, I think it would be a mistake to require that each contract have, you know, a specific.
It will depend on the contract, and what it's about. If it's construction, well, we can't do a 30-day.
Exactly, that's exactly right. And keep in mind, you know, it's really the expensive contracts that we're talking about. You know, I mean, you know, these big construction projects, or, you know, long-term agreements with lobbyists, you know, whatever the deal is. I obviously I wrote the language, but really it was based upon discussions that have been had amongst the board members and issues that we have come across in dealing with contracts that have really become no longer useful, but that still have, you know, some conditions. So, if anybody's got any questions about that, that's to me the most significant change. Please ask. Here's another item on here I want to bring up. I think that there might have been some confusion on our end at one point. And so let me ask you, Juan, if look on page 3. Oh, you don't have it. I do want to ask you about this. Look on page 3. You see where it says vendor information? Oh, okay. So, Jaron, when I think he had a discussion with you, and he had put some language in there about requiring W-9s, and the language that he put in based on his understanding what you're saying included that any subcontractor or vendor has to provide W-9s from their employees.
Oh, no.
Okay, I didn't think so. Right. Okay, so tell me this, so this language says the district must request, and all vendors and contractors in the district must provide a copy of IRS Form W-9 of vendors and contractors performing work for the district. And I know that that's a requirement. Does that language get you there as far as what you need?
Yeah, I think that, again, this was included on the hearing that we have.
Okay. And then there's also the conflict form. It's a 1225, 1295, but only after it's the contractor or the vendors awarded the bid. Is that correct, or am I wrong? So when they submit the W-9, that form needs to be submitted too?
Certificate is 1295.
The 1295.
But they file with the state, and then they give us a copy of it.
And then we have
Okay. So then do we need it added to the language? Because it only states the W-9.
Yeah, we can do that. Okay, so,
we keep up our.
okay, that's, we can certainly add that. You know, the board learned, again, just like with bylaws, you know, you say, hey, you know, motion to approve the, proposed procurement policy with the addition of the, language related to, what is it, the 1295. 1295.
The 1295 form or form 1295 or?
1294.
1295 conflict.
Oh, that's.
And you have to do it online.
Yes.
I think that's it. Let me go ahead and take this to one of the procurement policy we had before, similar to the bylaws. There's just a bunch of kind of duplicative language on certain things, but I did rewrite the policy statement in paragraph 1, very first paragraph. And I want to just take a minute to read it to the board because something I put some thought into, and per tax report. The policy of AGUA Special Utility District to administer and procure goods and services with transparency, according with all applicable laws and regulations, and in a manner that fosters the public trust. That paragraph was quite a bit longer before. It had some things in there that were really a policy statement. But I thought with the direction that I've been given by this board to rewrite these policies and procedures, I thought it was a distinct way of, telling the public, hey, look, we're going through this, and this is why. But policy statements by the board are, they mean something. And so if there's proposed language to changes to that, it's not strong enough or it's too strong, anything like that, that's something that the board can say.
Any comments? Suggestions?
I think it's fine.
Good. Sandoval? Good. Guess we need a motion, right? And then,
So it'd be a motion to approve the procurement policy, as presented with the amendment to require a Form 1295. And we'll make that change to it. Present it to signature.
We're number one.
number 7.
Okay, I make a motion to approve the resolution amending for the procurement policy, with the exception, right, of making a change on the Form 1295
To
require
vendors to provide.
AGUA.
Okay. I have a motion by Diaz. Second by Sandoval. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 8, discussion possible action on approval of additional services regarding ongoing water and wastewater financing needs with CAPEX Consulting.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, several years ago, 2 years ago, we hired CAPEX to do the rate studies and of course also water rights. We're continuing to buy water rights, and he's been coordinating with the irrigation district and making sure that the charges are set based on the fact that he even negotiated a new contract with
It saves us a lot of money.
Saves us a lot of money. And now he's also helping, Jeff on the issue with analyzing the PSI contract.
Matt.
Mm-hmm.
Wrong attorney.
Yeah. So we're, it's time to come in. He's completed his contract, and we're asking to provide a new contract for him to continue providing services.
I have a question. Is he, I don't know, are we giving additional fees or he's charging the same?
He's charging the same. It's just that
2-year
done
contract?
his work on the previous contract.
Yeah.
So 2-year contract? A 2-year contract?
It takes about 2 years to do it.
Okay. I guess I motion to approve item number 8.
I have a motion by Sandoval.
I second.
Second by Diaz. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Number 9, discussion possible action regarding renewal provision for a CSJ group contract and proposed modification.
Mr. President, the board may remember, as of right now, Mr. Sines, CSJ Group engineers has a contract to provide general manager services to the district. Changed the legislation. I think after that contract came online, required that the general manager be an actual employee, so it can't be a contract with the company. The contract that CSJ has with the district, or I should say the supplemental amendment, the supplemental contract that allows, that provides for the provision of general manager services, had a 180-day automatic renewal provision. If notice wasn't given by last April, say 1st or something like that, that it would automatically renew for another year. We couldn't let that happen because statute says you can't do that, right? So what we did was we came to the board on April 1st, and the board approved, and CSJ Group also agreed to modify the contract contract, so that 180-day provision basically became 45 days, and we agreed that, the contract really just had to be either terminated or whatever by August 16th, right, which is, a couple weeks from now, right? What we have discussed and talked about to go forward, because that contract ends on September 30th, all right? And so what, the discussions I've had with Mr. Stein, in conjunction with some other board members that are aware of it, said, hey, look, let's just do this, because, we've got to go out for, solicitation of resumes for a general manager that will be an actual employee, all right? Let's just agree that the supplemental contract regarding the provision of general manager services just ends on September 30th without any notice from anybody, okay? So the board wouldn't have to, because the technical term would be, hey, we got to get notice of termination of the contract, so it doesn't renew, right? So what the discussion I've had with Mr. Stein on behalf of CSJ is, hey, look, let's just amend the agreement so that it terminates by its own terms on September 30th. Of course, in that time, there'll be, likely interviews or review of resumes and whatnot going on. But instead of having to terminate a contract, let's just say it's over on September 30th. I understand that Mr. Stein is good with that. And if that's the case, well then, that would be my recommendation, or that we just agree to, have the contract terminate on the 30th, instead of having, a renew or non-renew or terminating.
We talked about it through mutual agreement as part of the clause there. Obviously, we have to abide by the bill.
Yeah.
It has to happen. So I'm good with it.
Okay. Thank you.
So if the board is fine with that, then what we could do is I prepared a written amendment that just, says straightforward that. Mr. Stein's had a chance to look at it, and he's, told me that he's fine with language. It says the, supplemental agreement number 1, general manager services will expire on September 30th, 2021, with no further action by any party. So the board would need to approve that agreement if the board, so chooses. Now, if the board takes no action, then on the 16th, that contract renews until 2022, which is going to create a problem, to be in compliance, out of compliance with state law. So,
we don't want to
do
see
something. Yeah. Right.
So I guess it would be not to renew the contract, but also.
It would be a motion to approve an amendment modifying the agreement so that it expires without further notice on September 30th.
There we go.
Motion to approve amendment.
To modify the supplemental agreement so that general manager services expire on September 30th, 2021, with no further action by any party.
Do I have a motion?
Okay. It's in September
30th.
30th. Okay. So I make a motion to approve the amendment to modify the supplemental agreement so that the general manager of contract expires September 30th.
I have a motion by Solis. I have a second by Sandoval. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 10, discussion possible action regarding solicitation of applications for position of general manager. On this one,
On this one, in lieu of the fact that it's happening, obviously, we need to comply with the bill. So this is for, appointment of a general manager. So we need to advertise.
yeah, I would recommend to the board that maybe we should have our legal oversee this. I don't know.
Yeah, so what we need to do is we need to advertise for, resumes, to seek applications. This is not pursuant to a particular procurement law, like a lot of things we have to do, but there is going to be an open position for general employees as opposed to CSJ group contracts for, the general manager positions. But, in order to, the fact that there will be, a vacancy as of September 30th, we do need to seek applications, and advertise for those applications. So I suggest the website and some other sources. But that is something that needs to be done. After those applications come in, then, you know, everybody on board can be provided copies. There's a procedure that we've used in the past, to interview for that position. It's subject to a later meeting, but it's a little bit complicated because you don't want to interview in public, but to have all the board members there, we can do it in executive session, basically. But that's a procedure that I've dealt with and handled and put together before on a few general managers ago. So we can discuss that and prove that at a later time. But as of right now, we need to, the district needs to seek applications for general managers.
What do you recommend, to receive the applications?
Well, so I would recommend that every board member get a copy of the applications as they come in. Now, what we don't want to do is put in our advertisement that, hey, you have to send an application to 7 weeks, right? Okay, so we.
Lucky enough.
Right.
That'd be crazy.
So, I mean, what, you know, in the past, what was done is that it was sent to board president and legal counsel. It really doesn't make a difference. And then, you know, then they would be distributed, to everybody on the board as they came in. So, that would be, you know, one way to do it. It really doesn't make a difference. Everybody's going to get a copy. It's something that every board member is entitled to anyway.
Yeah.
But, you know, there just does need to be a point of contact, and it really doesn't need to come into, the office here.
Yeah.
You know, it needs to go to a particular individual.
At what point does this, begin? The application and all this,
Well, if the board, you know, approves the action, and if you know, Mr. President said, if it was going to be, I mean, I would start drafting up a, you know, request for application, you know, that details the position and whatnot. I would confer with Mr. Sines too, he's got real experience in, you know, what the job entails. And,
yeah.
And then put that together and put it up in meetings. We want to get as many
It should
applications
become
as we can.
proactive.
Yeah. I say immediately, we're talking about next week, you know, something like that. Take a little bit of effort.
Yeah.
Any other comments, questions? Is there a motion?
So
Application?
you could make, for instance, as has been discussed, if the board wanted to make me the point person on doing that, there'd be a motion authorizing legal counsel to draft and submit requests for applications for the board for the position of general manager for the district.
We have a motion?
Yeah.
Make a motion to authorize, legal counsel to draft and submit, applications for the general manager.
A request for application.
A request for application.
Yeah.
Okay. Second. I have a motion by Solis, I have a second by Sandoval. On the favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Number 11, discussion possible action regarding interlocal agreement with City of Palmview to maintain and service fire hydrants within city limits.
Mr. President, members of the board, similar to the City of Peñitas agreement, we're basically changing the name from Peñitas to Palmview on this one. We have, submitted it to the City of Palmview, and I believe they voted on their Tuesday meeting, or last week, Tuesday meeting. And approved it. So, we should be getting their sign. We need to formally approve it as well.
It's the same contract as Peñitas, that no charge on us, everything is on them.
Yeah, it's other than changing the name, yes, it's the same process that we all approved previously. Perfect.
And it's still, I think, it was for October, Albert, right?
Yeah, unless they took it out, it's still for.
October.
So I motion to approve item number 11.
I have a motion by Sandoval,
Second.
second by Diaz. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Number 12, discuss and possible action on appointment of advisory committee pursuant to Texas Local Government Code 395.058 as required to review, evaluate, update impact fees charged by district, table at the July 1st, 2021 meeting. I need a motion to untable the item.
I motion, item number 12 to untable.
I have a motion by Sandoval. I have a second by Diaz. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. On this one, number 12, on the committees, I have John Warmack, that was the previous chairman. I recommend for him to be the chairman again. We have Juan Jose Peña to be removed and appoint Marcos Ochoa. And then we have to remove David Esenciano and appoint Adolfo Villarreal. And then to remove Joe Chapa and appoint Mary T. Hernandez. And then to remove Dennis Aguirre and appoint Fernando Reyes. This is for the advisory committee for the impact fee. The board has any questions or recommendations? Okay.
So then,
Make
I
a motion?
Yeah, go ahead.
Make the motion to approve the new advisory committee, for to review, evaluate, and update impact fees charged by the district.
I have a motion by Diaz.
Second.
I have a second by Sandoval. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. 13, discuss and possible action regarding the district property for power backup facility.
Mr. President, members of the board, I'm gonna ask you to table this one, I haven't had a response back. I'd rather get all the information and present it at the next board.
Need a motion to table item 13.
I, motion to table item number 13.
I have a motion by Sandoval,
Second.
second by Solis. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 14, general managers report. Item A, June financials.
Yes, on the June financials, we're pretty still, neck and neck on the percentages regarding, our budgets throughout the year. This is complete third year. We had a lot of rain, so the revenues are a little less, a lot of people aren't watering. So
The rain is stopped.
Or else we'd probably be, a couple of points higher, we're at 49% of our budget at 50% year. And we're at 51% of our operating expense. We were able to quiet down our plant people and not have a lot of expenses. Juan was at our last meeting and he told them, they're kind of abiding. I did turn down a couple. Those weren't emergency ones, so it's not ones that I'll call. Just talk about the other ones. So far, so good, and I think they're finally seeing that we need to, not just take care of things, and we will, but maybe they can delay them so that everything else can catch up.
Item B, second quarter investment report.
Yes, it's on item 14B. This year, I looked at it, and it's pretty much the same as the last quarter.
There's the extreme environment right now that we're experiencing everywhere, not just here. That's why our certain snow are so, but that's why I'll be during these times.
Okay.
Because we haven't gone on a hurricane.
Sure.
We'd be worse.
Yeah.
You'd be making no money.
And
Item C, Texas Water Development Board, Palmview Sanitary Sewer Improvement.
I'd like to take that into executive session.
Okay, I need a motion to take, item C into executive session.
I make a motion.
Oh, just a report, right? Because we already have it item A. Yeah, it's an item A, so, okay.
Right.
So no update?
No, it's the same, we had our meeting last week with the Water Development Board. They're fine with where we're at with 3 out of the 4 projects on.
Okay.
And so it's 4 projects we're going to
Okay. Item, D, NetBank Technical Assistance Agreements or hookups.
Me the one? Yes.
Milo,
Yes, sir.
can you give us an update?
Yes, so far, give me a second. So far, they've completed 852 service lines. Seven out of those 852, 719 have been connected, and sewers flowing. From those 719, 598 septic tanks have been fully pumped out, and out of those, 535 have been decommissioned, filled with sand. That's where we are right now. We've been working with Mr. Carlos Acevedo from NatBank. He actually requested a status on this yesterday as well. So we've been working with them, and we meet monthly. We're moving along as best as we can based on the field conditions. So that's the update that we have on the project.
Okay. Any questions, comments, project? Thank you, Milo.
Thank you.
Thank you, Milo.
Item 15, executive session pursuant to Texas Open Meetings Act and Texas Government Code 551.071, consultation with attorney, 551.072 regarding real property, 551.073 prospective gifts, 551.074 personal matters, and 551.076 security. Item A, Texas Water Development Board, Palmview Sanitary Sewer Improvement Project. Item B, case number C-3353-20-1, SMB Infrastructure versus AGUA Special Utility District, the District Court of Hidalgo County, Texas, 398th Judicial District. Item C, case number C-38856-20-D, Marvin Lee Tervin versus AGUA Special Utility District, Morville LLC and SMB Infrastructure Ltd, the District Court of Hidalgo County, Texas, 206th Judicial District. Item D, Jimmy Klossner and Sons, liquidated damages for Palmview wastewater collection system. 1, lift stations A2, F, G, and G7, project number 3. Item E, Morville LLC, liquidated damages for Palmview wastewater collection system, main lift station and force main, project 4. Item F, Salida del Sol tank certification. Item G, Performance Services Inc., Smart Meter Program Guarantee. Item H, Mandela Project. I need a motion to go into executive session at 1:29. Motion by Sandoval. Second by Solis. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. I need a motion to come out of executive session at 3:02.
So move.
I have a motion by Sandoval,
Second.
second by Solis. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 16, discuss a possible action regarding items discussed in executive session. There's no action. I need a motion for adjournment at 3:02.
So move.
Motion by Sandoval,
Second.
second by Solis. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.